is ring announcer Thomas Triber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. We are brought to you by the Sheridan Report, so make sure you check them out on Twitter at Sheridan Report. I am your co-host for Inside Boxing Weekly, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in my co-host. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing really damn well as always. Whenever I get to talk boxing with you two, it's always a good night.
Oh, now it's you two. Okay. The last couple nights, John, it's just been me. Now it's you two. So
I've been missing John a little bit.
That's good. Jeremiah knows I'm here. That's good.
It's almost like you're a guest now. So.
Yeah, I guess you guys are getting enough rhythm going.
It's our special guest lawyer, just in case Jeremiah gets thrown in a hokey again, and of course, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here, Mike and Jeremiah.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about last weekend's fights. There were some decent fights here. We will start off with Sunday night's card. Ray Beltran beat Hiroki Okada by a ninth round, or he lost. Yeah, he beat him by a ninth round knockout. I can't read my own handwriting sometimes. What was your take on this fight, John?
Good fight, good action fight. Beltran almost got knocked out early in the fight after he had dropped Okada. It was a good brawl, and I don't know how Beltran survives these wars at his age, 37 years old, a lightweight, but he pulled it off. You know, he's got good punching power, and I thought as the fight was going on that maybe at his age he just was not going to have enough of that old power and snap and the punches to pull it out, but there he did it, and he got a decisive knockout, and it was a good action fight. I don't think it's a fight. It was a fight between two guys that are particularly going anywhere, but I understood that going in, and I liked the fight because it provided real good entertainment, and we can talk about it a little later. I was hopeful that type of fight on Sunday night was going to draw in hardcore fans and some new casual fans, but that didn't happen. But Top Rank did put on a good fight here, and you know Beltran's going to get at least another good TV fight because he's still able to provide action even at his age with that high contact style.
Oh hell, Jeremiah! They might even feed him to Lomachenko before it's over with.
Oh God! I mean that would just be a
I'd rather see
typical
that
thing for Top Rank. Oh my God! I don't want to see.
Though.
I don't. I actually think Beltran is probably. Well, I don't know, man. I do think Krolla's closer to his prime, but what I got out of this fight, and Beltran is a good action fighter. You got to give him a lot of respect in that regard. But yeah, I mean, he had a back and forth with a guy that I really wasn't familiar with. And like John said, he got hurt pretty damn bad there. I mean, he scored an early knockdown and, you know, eventually got the job done with a nice right hand. But, you know, just his struggles. I mean, again, I like the action part, but just his struggles with guys of this caliber, to me, he's a stoppage waiting to happen. But he's fun. You know, I got to give him that much. You know, I don't think he's never going to be a major player, you know, at 135 again. But, you know, you can put him in fun fights, just like John said, and we can get some entertainment value out of him. And we'll be good to go. But Lomachenko, just don't put him anywhere near that. I don't want Krolla anywhere near him either. But unfortunately, we seemed pretty optimistic there for a little while with the WBA, you know, allowing him a waiting period until he gets that fight. But now it looks like it's going to happen, which is unfortunate. But, yeah, I don't know.
All right, moving on. In the main event, Jose Carlos Ramirez beats Jose Zepeda in a close majority decision, Jeremiah. Did you like the decision?
Yeah, I mean, I could handle the decision. I didn't really find it controversial, but I did feel, again, maybe I had some rose-tinted glasses on there because I did say the weekend prior that this was probably the most competitive main event that they had. And I was proven to be right. I mean, I noted that Zepeda, his only loss was to Terry Flanagan, and we don't really know how he would have fared in that fight because he had to bow out with an injury. But I thought he boxed pretty nicely. I mean, his jab was all right, but his counter punching was pretty good. Ramirez, clearly there's some holes in his game, and he's there to be hit. And I do think a better operator, somebody like Regis Prograis, probably exposed those brutally, but it was a fun fight. I mean, there was action all the way through. Not a lot of drama, but it was close. It was a nip and tuck affair, and I didn't mind the decision. I thought Ramirez was the aggressor, Zepeda was the boxer. Again, no complaints on the decision, but I do think that it shows that Zepeda is a pretty good operator.
All right. When we look at this, we'll look at it from the Ramirez aspect, John. How good is he? Because I don't think Jeremiah's real impressed. I'm not real impressed. Do you see something we don't?
Yeah, I think you guys seem to be what the general consensus is. I think he's maybe just a hair better than that. I'm not saying I would pick him against Prograis or Taylor. I wouldn't, but I do think he gives those guys better fights than people think. I saw a lot of people saying, well, I like the talent of Prograis and Taylor. I think those guys are real talented, both of them, which is why I'd like to see them fight. But I think Ramirez is close. I don't think there's the wide gap that everybody seems to think where Ramirez would just get blown out or not be competitive. I kind of think he is competitive with those guys. He's got amateur pedigree. He's got talent. He's been working with Robert Garcia now for a couple of fights, and he did have a lot of trouble with Zepeda. I agree with Jeremiah. I don't have any problem with the decision. I think Ramirez came on enough at the end. He was really just too strong for him. And Zepeda, I agree with Jeremiah also. He showed he belongs. He had boxing skill. I just think he wasn't quite strong enough. He was smart with the counters, but when Ramirez kept pressing him, he just really didn't have enough strength and power to hold him back, and Ramirez was able to come on. But I think Ramirez makes good fights with guys like Taylor and Prograis. I'm not saying I'm going to pick him over him, but I do think he at least belongs in the conversation. So I'm not really down on him, but I was just really disappointed with the TV performance of the card because, as all three of us seem to agree, I thought both fights worked out well. I think Top Rank seems to have gotten at least better with their matchmaking, but the numbers weren't there. 650,000. On TV, Sunday's the most watched night of TV. You're on regular ESPN with a 7:00 slot, which is basically the Super Bowl time slot where you're trying to get the most out of both coasts on a Sunday. I got to admit, I thought going in, you had Ramirez, an American Olympian, Beltran's an action guy. The fights did work out well. I thought this rating was going to be really high and a good chance for boxing to show what it could do, and it ended up being the opposite. For the amount of households that ESPN reaches, 655,000 is just not good.
You think it maybe it's because Sunday night the man has to give up the TV to the woman, and the woman was watching the Grammys?
A lot of people speculated that. I think it had something to do with it, but then I decided to research a little myself because there's still more viewers available, even though the Grammys is undoubtedly heavy competition. And America's Funniest Home Videos on ABC got 4.8 million viewers. So
yeah, because it's America's Funniest Home Videos. Jesus, you can't go up against that.
You can't take on America's Home Videos, right? I mean,
you especially can't
Disney
do it
channels.
with fighters that don't capture any imagination at all. Because let's face it, 99% of the general public has no clue that Ramirez was a U.S. Olympian.
And I think that those kind of things are telling, and that's where boxing's got some problems because it is that. And when you look at it in hindsight, it's you've got a few fighters out there where even though it's mainly hardcore boxing fans that know them, they're good enough, it seems, that there will be some more viewers that tune in. Thurman, Pacquiao, Crawford, Lomachenko. Those guys' numbers do go up. I mean, and in hindsight, Ramirez wasn't enough for this time slot. Maybe he should have been on a card with a Lomachenko or a Crawford or something like that. Because I really think that this is a time slot that could work. It worked for Caleb Plant big time. He's on FS1. He was on FS1, which has less households than ESPN by quite a large margin, and they did about $1 million. When he fought Scott the guy. So Plant really showing. Brandon Figueroa was on that card. That worked out well. So I thought on ESPN this would do well, even though it was Ramirez, but it didn't, and it did show that he draws well in Fresno. So you thought maybe there'd be some translation. At least I did, but there was not, and it's of some concern.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question. So I noticed you tweeted out, and you were talking about how people in the boxing sphere, were trying to explain away the declining numbers. And I thought you put it in a way, to be honest with you, when you said that the people trying to explain away boxing's declining numbers are the same people who would be on the Titanic and say, oh, well, we hit an iceberg, but we'll arrive at our destination, in a little while. And I just want to ask you about that tweet. Was that only in regards to the Ramirez fight, or was it in regards to just all the numbers that were released?
I was mainly focused on the Ramirez fight because I'll admit I thought it would do well in that slot. But I was also referring to, frankly, Gervonta Davis's numbers were poor on Showtime, 311,000. Even though that's premium cable, those are not good numbers either. And this is a guy that we're looking at as a potential future star, but even though he had Ruiz, a last-minute opponent, still he didn't have star-like numbers. So I thought with those two fights, I felt like when I wrote the tweet, and a lot of people did seem interested in it, about the Titanic comparison and ignoring that we struck some ice, was I felt like I saw too many people who should know better, and I'm not sure what their motivations are. I'm not going to speak for their motivations because I don't know for sure. But, these numbers come out and they say, oh, boxing doing it good again with the numbers, and these are not good numbers. I just thought that somebody had to point it out because I want the sport to do well, but we can't stick our head in the sand and pretend there's not problems when there are problems, because if you get bad numbers too many times, then it's just going to fall off to niche things that everybody's got to pay a lot for who's a hardcore fan, and that's not going to be a good thing. So I don't think every time a number comes out, which we've seen a lot, sometimes the numbers are good or show progress, but these were not this weekend in two cards. So I thought that when I saw some other tweets out there like, we're doing fine out there, I thought, no, we're not doing fine, at least last weekend. So you got to keep an eye on stuff like that.
All right, I would like to bring up the fact that MLS Soccer only does 268,000 viewers on average.
Well, it should.
They don't do that well, right? They don't do that well. Boxing can beat sports like that, and that's what I look to.
I just wanted to bring it up because I've been hearing since I was a little kid how soccer was going to rule the world someday, but that day never comes because it's a stupid sport. All right, let's move on.
The only thing I was going to add there is, when boxing is well, there's NBA regular season games that'll do, 1.2 million around there, 1.5 million. NHL games that do under $1 million. Boxing, you need to at least be while you're making progress, you need to at least show you can beat that stuff.
Yeah, because hockey is basically a regionalized sport also. There is one thing that I just found that really gives me hope, though, for the future of boxing, and that is the fact that Kelly Pavlik is calling out Tony Bellew now.
Yeah, that's going to do real well. Kelly Pavlik, after this long layoff, and my guess is he's still probably been drinking, like hell for all these years. And come on, you look at the guy, and he's just. I've heard him on air sometimes, and he sounds like he's been sipping back on Grandpa's old cough medicine here and there, and I don't know, but Tony Bellew, it's the guy retired. And, if you're trying to cash out, I guess that's a guy that you would target. Obviously, Bellew's kind of a fan favorite now, and the way that he went out against Usyk has endeared him to all these people. But Pavlik, to me, if he wants to come back, I mean, you just, like you've said in the past, Mike, you just got to let a guy do what he wants to do. I mean, it does seem like at what point, when do you save him, right? When you say is enough. But nobody's going to stop him. This is a sport where you have a lot of freedom, maybe arguably too much freedom. But if he wants to get back in the mix of things, don't jump right back into Tony Bellew just for a cash out. I mean, if they're going to allow it, I'm not into it. But
well, I don't think Tony Bellew would do it anyways.
Well, and I really hope not. If Kelly Pavlik wants to get in the groove of things, just go beat up some no-hopers, get your name back out there, and then maybe you can cash out a little bit. But, just to jump right in, I don't want any of that.
All right, next up, we have probably the best moment of the weekend. Andrew Cancio, huge underdog, beats Alberto Machado with a fourth-round knockout. John, is it safe to say that this is why we watch boxing? I mean, a story like this?
Yeah, I certainly, wasn't expecting this, but the one thing you can look at in hindsight was, Machado, he had took out, Jezreel Corrales, who had beat Uchiyama, but hadn't looked any good really since then. And just that Machado's opposition really wasn't that great. I'm not saying we saw this coming, but, I do think that that's part of it, that he was a guy that I don't even want to say he was just kind of starting to look good against some weak opposition. And, I don't know if he was even, you were projecting that he was definitely a star or anything, just starting to watch him some. And Cancio, this guy who has to work a full-time job and everything, grits it out and pulls the upset. And, that is why you watch boxing. You hope to get those surprises sometimes when you're watching these fights that you think might be a mismatch. Unfortunately, the surprises don't come often enough, but there was one Saturday night, and I do think that is a good thing.
All right, Jeremiah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with you guys. I mean, this is a story that, so many people can, like Bellew in a sense, can endear themselves to. Cancio, he's just kind of a guy. I mean, he didn't really ring any alarm bells for anyone. He was viewed as a soft touch for Machado. Machado was highly rated in his division. So, again, a lot of people are just like, okay, well, he beat this guy. He'll move on. Like we've talked about, on the weekly show and many other shows, how these guys earn these trinkets and then they get these soft touches, and then they're expected to move on to something harder. And you fight twice a year, one soft, one a little bit harder. And so Machado this was just kind of a shoe-in, right? This was in the bag. But Cancio proved us all wrong, and I was. Like a lot of people, I was kind of sitting at the edge of my seat and cheering. I mean, he just really went out there. He's like a Rocky story, right? He went out there and got it. He probably trained his ass off, had laser-like focus, and got the job done. I mean, you got to applaud the guy. And you look at his losses, and some of these. He just reminds me of one of those guys who's kind of hard luck, right? He gets thrown in, he loses a couple. He's not. He's not lighting it up even in his victories, and then he comes in here and upsets one of the most highly ranked fighters in his class. I mean, so I was happy to see it, and like you said, Mike, I think this is why we watch the sport. These feel-good stories, and kudos to him. I mean, and there's also good fights to be made in that division, and so I hope it happens. But yeah, good for him.
All right, now my problem is this. I watched Gervonta Davis. I flipped it over to this fight. I watched the first two rounds, and I thought, oh, it's the blowout I thought it would be, and I flipped it to something else.
You messed up, man.
Yeah. Then, 15 minutes later, I see people tweeting about how Andrew Cancio won the fight. So, bad on me. Next up, Ray Vargas wins over Franklin Manzanilla. Ooh. That was a rough one to say, and I probably said it wrong, but he won a dominant decision. Start off with Jeremiah here. I mean, you a Vargas fan?
I mean, Vargas is all right. I mean, I'm not a fan. I mean, like most of these fights, I follow along, but it's hard to really get into these softer touches. Of course, that's why we talk so much about guys like Cancio, because it's just so often in this sport that you have matches and the is already it's almost pre-written as if it's a story. So I didn't expect more than what happened. Vargas himself is a good fighter. I don't think he's ever going to be at the top of the division, but he's good. I mean, I like him. I kind of saw him as a Machado type guy, where he was long and lanky, and he seemed to have some pop to his punches, but he doesn't really light up the scoreboard for me. I don't expect him to be the king of the mountain anytime soon, but I don't know. He got the job done. And like so many other guys we talk about in this sport, I just hope he really moves on to bigger and better things, like we'll talk about, with Gervonta Davis. But he's just got to step it up. I mean, we got to start making the big fights here.
Yeah, John, Ray Vargas, what do you think the ceiling on Vargas's career is? Where do you think he goes from here? Where should he go?
I kind of see him like Jeremiah. Every time I watch the guy fight, he's long and lanky, and those guys tend to, in boxing, be able to get a lot of leverage and a lot of power. And you see spots in his fights where I think he's going to explode like that, and it doesn't seem to happen. And that's what I keep waiting for with him. He looks to me with that height that it's within reach that he could be one of the future. I've seen him thinking it could be within reach that he could be one of the dominant guys in 122, 126 pound area, but then it just doesn't seem to get to that next level, and been waiting for that from him for a few fights. And like Jeremiah also correctly said, the opposition hasn't been that great. So, like Jeremiah said, these guys that, there's twice a year, and then a lot of times they're fighting these easy alphabet defenses, and time goes by, and that's what for Ray Vargas it is for me, is that he's kind of slipping under my radar screen. A couple of years ago, I was looking for him as being this ascendant guy at 122 or 126, and in terms of maybe having some real more star type potential, and that part I'm not seeing yet.
All right, next up, main event, Showtime, Gervonta Davis in a one-round blowout over Hugo Ruiz. We'll start with you, John, because me and Jeremiah discussed this a little bit Monday night. But it seems to me Gervonta Davis keeps getting better. Hugo Ruiz is not a bum. He's a decent fighter. He's got some skill. And the way Davis went after him, number one, do you think Adrian Broner was thinking, damn, maybe I should do that sometime? And number two, is Floyd Mayweather going to ruin this dude's career? Because now they're talking about taking an exhibition in Japan against the guy that Floyd knocked out.
I think you make a good point, Mike. I think that Davis, when he's in shape, and even though it was Ruiz, who was not a bad fighter, but he's just not strong enough for Davis. Davis, I mean, you can tell I think you can tell he's in shape. So he seems to be taking care of business like that in recent fights. Looking sharp doing it. Even when he was first coming up, I do think he does some things that remind me of Tyson, a southpaw Tyson, of course, at a much lower weight. And I don't think just because of his style, even if he's in shape, that it's going to be a lot of years for him at the top. But I think if he stays in shape like this, he can have a great run for 3 years or something like that. If we get him in with some better opposition, I don't think necessarily Floyd Mayweather is going to ruin Davis's career. I think Davis has just got to keep staying in shape, and then let's hope we see him in with some better opposition. One thing that I'd like to see, I mean, to me, you look at his strength, even though he's only 5'5", I mean, the guy should already be officially fighting at lightweight. A matchup that I think would be kind of intriguing because of the size difference would be, put him in with Robert Easter. I mean, PBC has both guys, That's a fight that's interesting.
I think he blows Easter out. I wasn't high on Davis a year ago, but to me, the kid looks like he's getting better. And the thing I like about him is he at least goes for it.
I think you're right. And I think he'll blow a lot of guys away. I'm not even talking about him with Lomachenko because I just don't see how they're going to make that fight. But I'd like to see that fight. I mean, that is a fight that would interest me. I'm just thinking with the PBC angle, I would also pick him over Easter, but trying to think of some good fights that are a little more interesting that would be easier to make, and that was one to me that comes to mind. I don't need him. I don't need to see him blowing away 130-pound guys that he's far superior than, and they got to try to dig up opposition for him. So that part I'm kind of tired of. I don't need that anymore.
Yeah, but I think that's all we're going to get. I mean, this is the only guy that when you look at him, he does not bring up the elephant in the room, which is Vasyl Lomachenko. And the thing that really worries me, and the reason I brought Floyd into this, is Floyd, from the interview I heard with him, sounds like they're willing to, wait 3 or 4 years, let Lomachenko deteriorate more, and then maybe fight him, because that's what he said, basically.
Yeah, it frustrates. We all get frustrated with boxing, but what frustrates me is right now, Lomachenko is one of the best in the sport. The Comey fight wouldn't have been bad. I think we all agreed on that, but Comey did get hurt. But, in terms of big fights, of course, we don't have a promotional issue with Teofimo Lopez, and he's there, and they're not talking about putting that together. Top Rank could make that tomorrow if they felt like it. And then, Davis is a cross-promotional thing, but in other words, these are really intriguing fights, and even if Davis or Lopez were to lose, it would be kind of like Canelo against Mayweather. They're not going to be set back or devastated. Let them take the shot at it, and then if they pull it off, then they'll be huge stars. You'll have these young, you could have a young guy that has beaten Lomachenko. So, it seems to just need a little creativity there, but you're not getting it. So it's kind of a shame because those are good fights available. And from the Lomachenko side of things, he needs somebody to fight that where the public's really going to get interested. He draws good ratings on ESPN. These maybe could be pay-per-view fights. Dare I say it? You don't want it to be, but they would do that. So it might be good for Lomachenko too, but it's not happening.
Yeah, and when I look at it, Davis with his size, I think he might be, if you look at it, this may sound crazy since he's a weight class lower, but I think with his size, he may even be the bigger, stronger guy than Lomachenko, Jeremiah. Not saying he can beat him, but he's the guy that I think is most capable of it.
Yeah, I completely agree that Davis is the bigger guy. I mean, we saw that he struggled. I mean, he missed weight by, 0.2 pounds, and sometimes you just don't get it right when you're cutting weight. Sometimes things just don't go right, but a lot of times it's an indication that your body just can't make the weight. It's rejecting. You can only dry out so much. And I think Davis is getting very close to that point where his body is going to force him to be at 135. And that's precisely where he belongs. I mean, it's a traditional weight division. Physically, I think he's better suited there. His speed and power are not going to suffer one bit. I mean, you look at the landscape and he would be favored over just about every single person. I mean, aside from Garcia, if he comes back down to 135, and Lomachenko. And that's not bad at all, if you ask me. But in terms of, competitiveness, Davis is certainly in the top three, like you guys already alluded to. He's certainly in the top three of the guys who would pose the biggest trouble for Vasyl Lomachenko. And for me, we talked about this on Monday, I believe. For Davis, I still – I mean, this is a dude, and this is a problem with boxing as well. Davis won an alphabet trinket in 2017, and we just really haven't seen him against top-level opposition. I mean, Jose Pedraza is really what he's resting his resume on at the moment, and he looked very, very good in that. And like you said, Mike, their attitude towards Lomachenko is really concerning to me at this point because – Davis it's not only the interview. You look at, Davis on Twitter, and he's just kind of been avoiding the whole situation for many, many years. And it kind of takes me to the Vanis Martirosyan thing, where he was talking about how all these guys have become company men, right? And they won't say, oh, well, I want this guy or they want that guy. That's why you constantly see these fighters deferring to their managers or their promoters, and it's bullshit, honestly. I mean, come on. And Jules Augusta wrote an article on this. You can catch it. You can look at it at Ruling Truth. And I think he makes a salient point there where Mayweather seems to think that Davis can just be talented and just keep winning, and he'll be a household name and a pay-per-view star. Well, that completely ignores Mayweather's own past, where he beats Diego Corrales, who I think might have even been ranked in the pound for pound at the time. Right, but he whips Diego Corrales. He goes up, he beats Castillo. He whips Man.
Come on.
Right, but he did beat him in the rematch. But what I'm saying is, Mayweather earned his stripes, right? He beat Gennaro Hernandez. He earned his stripes at 130 and 135. And Davis
he didn't post until everybody knew who he was.
No, exactly. It was only until Mayweather had beaten those guys, made a name for himself at 140 pounds, and to his credit, right? I mean, he's a defensive-minded guy, and he's done really well doing that. But it really took him beating Arturo Gatti to help bring him in the spotlight, and then fighting Oscar De La Hoya, which really propelled him to another level, like most other guys. So Mayweather either lacks foresight or something
Maybe
to see that
Davis he can beat him,
and that very well could be the. That might have been Mayweather's mentality with a number of these guys, but. I mean, he wouldn't be far off in the general consensus there. But the point is that Davis needs to step up his competition if he wants to be a household name. So Mayweather was able to jump to, from 130 to 147, even to 154. So that sort of weight jumping allowed him to fight bigger and better fighters and get more exposure. It's tough really making a name for yourself at 135 pounds and below. So what I would recommend, and I think this is perfectly doable for Davis, go fight Miguel Berchelt, their number one and number two, create a new championship line, and then jump up to 135 and compete with guys like Lomachenko. And I wouldn't mind not only seeing Davis against not only against Easter, but I would like to see him against Comey too. I think that would be an interesting fight. And it's too bad we have all these promotional hurdles that exist, but I wouldn't mind seeing Tank Davis versus Teofimo Lopez. I mean, I think that would be a really interesting fight.
But you'll never
I know.
You got a better chance to see Lomachenko against him than Lopez right now.
Yeah, I know.
No chance of seeing the other one. So
right.
And I don't think he touches Berchelt either.
And that's a problem, in my opinion. I mean, Berchelt, I would favor Davis over Berchelt. And again, it's the number one and number two guys. I think it's doable this year after his quick turnaround time apparently they're having a fight in Baltimore in like April or May or something. But just pit those two. I mean, that would do good for his brand. I know Mayweather was big on fighting Latino fighters and, Mexican fighters and Mexican holidays. Fight Berchelt on a Mexican holiday. I mean, if you want to lay the groundwork for him to be a success, do something like that.
Well, I still think it comes back to the fact that maybe Floyd's not that confident in Gervonta. But next up, we're going to look at next week's fights. We're going to start off with Rob Brandt against a guy who we'll call him KB. It's Kasan Bazangurov. Bazangurov? Did I get that? Anybody know how to say that?
Is it Bangsarov?
It doesn't matter.
Know. There's no N or G. It's Bazangurov. I don't know. He's getting knocked out, but what do you think the chances are that he won't get knocked out, Jeremiah?
No, I think they're pretty slim, to be honest with you. I mean, I looked at his record, and he looks like he can give some guys rounds, but typically those are guys that. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just a soft touch, right? I mean, this is it's stereotypical of matchmaking. Make sure your guy doesn't get knocked off. That's why Cancillo is different in that regard. He actually could crack. But yeah, it's a soft touch. The guy isn't much of a threat. He can't really punch. He's like a lot of African fighters where his technique isn't great. His hand speed isn't particularly impressive. His power obviously isn't. He's sort of a go-getter, right? But there's just I don't even know what to say. I mean, the guy just
Jeremiah, he's a Russian.
Oh, who's I thinking of then?
I don't know.
Okay. I was thinking of the.
You were thinking of nondescript foreign opponents.
Yeah,
they
so
bring
you
over
just
for
guessed African.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was probably because I was looking at the box record of. Damon, I can't even remember the name, but it was an African who's fighting out of France, and yeah, obviously I got mixed up there.
Well, it's the first mistake you've made in 3 years, so we're going to let it go. John, clean Jeremiah's mess.
He can't. Bangsurov can't. He's not a puncher. He's actually a young guy, Russian who's mainly fought over. He fought Paul Valenzuela, who, even though he's got a lot of losses, he's one of those guys that has a lot of losses that actually can give you some trouble. But I mean, he gave Munguia trouble for a round, and then Munguia blew him away, which was one of the first fights where Munguia really caught my eye. But that sticks out to me that Bangsurov, he went the distance with Paul Valenzuela. So he doesn't have a high KO percentage, and then there's indication there that he really can't punch. I think it'd be an easy night for Brandt, except for the fact I've actually seen Rob Brandt from early in his career, and Rob Brandt, even in the time I've watched him, he's always up and down to me, where very early in his career when he was coming up, I wasn't that impressed with him. Then he had a few fights in a row where he impressed me, and I thought this guy's a lot better than I thought. And then he went into that super middleweight tournament and fought Jürgen Brammer and laid an egg when the odds makers had made him a slight favorite going in. Then I thought back to earlier in his career, I thought, I don't know about Brandt. And then he gets Eddie Mustafa and he comes back and he pulls a shocker and beats Murata. And then you're back to thinking he's good again. So I guess I'm just looking at it like, if the quote unquote good Rob Brandt shows up, you would think he takes this guy out. But I have seen points in Rob Brandt's career where he's been erratic. So he's not a guy that I feel completely comfortable with relying on all the time as to what he's going to do. But I would think if he fights like he fights when he fights well, like he did with Murata and those fights before the Brammer fight, that he could score a knockout. But he's not a guy that I'm comfortable with his consistency.
All right, next up, Omar Figueroa versus John Molina Jr. Any take on this? Because to me, I think Figueroa is the better fighter, but we all know Molina is going to come to fight John.
Yeah, I think PBC, good matchup here. They need this fight because the main event is not a good fight on paper. So this is on regular Fox. So I talked about the ratings earlier in the cast here, and this is the type of thing you got to watch for. I mean, boxing can't afford to, keep laying eggs or they've had some ones where they didn't lay an egg, but they can't lay another egg here. I don't think after last weekend, or maybe can't's too strong a word, but wouldn't be a good thing. So, need this card with Leo Santa Cruz at the top to get some good ratings on regular Fox. And the Figueroa Molina fight gives you a chance to have a good, entertaining fight that hardcore fans and casual fans will like. I think Figueroa is talented, but to me, his problems have been he's had a lot of fights where he's just not in shape. He has had layoffs. He's coming off a DUI. People aren't talking about that lately, but you can look at the circumstantial evidence of that. The guy makes you question the guy's training because then, frankly, you know how much drinking is going on during his training because that caused the fight to fall out for him. That was when he was going to fight Broner. He lost a big opportunity there. So here he's back, national TV. We know John Molina is going to come to fight. he's coming off that crazy brawl with Red Catch a year ago, which I don't think got enough credit. That was one of the craziest brawls you've ever seen, and he came out on top. But I think if Figueroa is in shape, John Molina's got a lot of power for the weight division, but I think if Figueroa is in shape, he's gonna get to John Molina in the first half of the fight. So I'm going to presume Figueroa is going to be in shape here, and he's going to get to John Molina in the first half of the fight. But it should be entertaining as long as it lasts, because Molina's always got that power, and we know what kind of heart he has. So he really truly is a guy you can't count out, especially against a guy that slugs like Figueroa. So it should be an entertaining fight.
All right, Jeremiah, you agree with John's assessment?
Yes, sir. I mean, I do think that it will last some rounds. I do think Molina, he is susceptible, but I don't know. He just, with the way Figueroa is, he's not with him not being able to keep his weight in check. I mean, he was a pretty good puncher, certainly nothing great, but he was a pretty good puncher at 135, but he's just, ever since that Jerry Belmonte's decision, he seems to have kind of like kicked the bucket a little bit on his career. I mean, he's just been up and down. He's had the weight jumps and he's had the flatter performances. And I've after the Belmonte's decision, to me he just struck me as a guy who you had to match carefully because his defense is shit. I mean, the guy takes far too many punches, and he seems to rely on his chin much too much. He's a swarmer. He'll be all over you. He throws tons of punches. His shot placement is pretty good. He's not just a headhunter, or he just doesn't go to the body. There is some mixture there, and there is some variety. But, and that should be enough to get him a W in this fight. But I do like the styles matchup. I do think Molina is a good fight for him at the moment. There's a lot of fun there. Molina can crack. And it'll be interesting to see if Figueroa can take some of those clean right hands, that Molina can deliver. Because we've seen, even though Figueroa does have a damn good chin, he was hurt, I believe, in the Antonio DeMarco fight, and there was even more cause for concern. So it's a good fight. I mean, it bolsters a crappy headliner, but that's certainly one that I'll tune into, and casual fans should as well. If there's a fight that you can almost bet on is going to have some drama in it, I think it's that one.
All right, next up, the main event, which I don't think is going to have any drama at all, Jeremiah.
Boring.
Leo Santa Cruz against Rafael Rivera. If it was Geraldo Rivera, I would find it more entertaining, John.
Yeah, this is not. PBC has been lucky with their matchmaking going back to December when they had Jermell Charlo against Harrison and Jamal Charlo against late replacement Korobov. They did good with the Caleb Plant and used Takagi card, but that one looked good going in on paper. But then they also got lucky with the fight with Thurman. When they had that fight worked out well. So this is one where they're taking another chance. That was Thurman and Josecito Lopez was the other one that worked out good. They're taking a chance here. What I'm saying is, are they going to get lucky again? In other words, this fight, the odds makers have got Rivera massive underdog. It's not a good fight on paper. They got lucky with a few other ones. Are they going to, or they could say their matchmaking was good enough that it worked out anyway? Is that going to happen again Saturday night, or is this just going to be like Jeremiah said, boring? Problem they got here is Rivera might be durable enough to go to 12, and Santa Cruz, while he's a very good fighter, is not a huge puncher. So this one could have the recipe for a possibility of 12 boring rounds, unless Rivera can surprise us or something. Because Santa Cruz, when he really overmatches a guy, he'll KO him, and the odds suggest that kind of mismatch here. But Rivera looks like he's shown enough durability that he might be able to go the route. So this bears some risk of not being a particularly exciting fight.
All right, Jeremiah, just say you agree and we'll move on.
Dude, why you sound bored even talking about it. I mean, my thing is I'm not. I mean, my thing is I don't necessarily think that the fight itself will be entirely boring. I mean, if we were pitting, two pure boxers together, then I would. That would be authentic in me saying that it would be boring. My problem is I find the matchmaking boring. And again, like John said, it could turn out to be better than expected. I mean, Rivera has some power. He was outboxed clearly by Joseph Diaz. I mean, he's not a horrible fighter, right? He can fight a little bit, right? And if Santa Cruz decides to be aggressive, if he decides to box, I do think it probably will be a boring fight. But if he decides to be aggressive and get him out of there, like I think he should, there could be some small fireworks in there. But what I'm bored of, and I know we're all bored of, is just the matchmaking. I mean, even the original fight was not something any of us looked forward to. There was a waste of time. Mara, as good as Santa Cruz is, he has shown that he is a good fighter. It's just that the guy has taken way too many soft touches, and you can tell that he's not really lighting it up for fans either. Because what has he won? Something like trinkets in 3 weight classes. But who's he done it against, right? I mean, besides the Frampton fight, there's not really a lot to talk about. I mean, right? I mean, there's just the guy's been maneuvered well, and of course, some of that has to do with his relationship with Al. They're tight; they like to rub elbows. But this is just another waste of a fight. I mean, Avalos was enough for me. I'm like, dude, you really got to step it up. The division isn't bad. There's guys to fight, and I suppose I can deal with this. I mean, I've got to deal with it, but they really have to put him and Gary Russell Jr. together. Those guys have to get it on. I mean, you got 2 guys under the same stable. There's no reason it can't be done. And for me, it's one of those things like it's a good division. Let's have some clarity there. Let's see who the number 1 guy is. So we can move on, or maybe it'll be close enough to where they can have a rematch, like the Frampton Leo Santa Cruz fight. But we've got to get more value out of this. We can't keep pairing guys like this, and then if the ratings are bad, they ask why. I mean, it's just so damn obvious why.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good point that Jeremiah made earlier. What's interesting to me, we're hardcore followers and commentators on the sport, but what's surprising, and maybe it's a good way in terms of the fan voting, is, we talked about it earlier with Gervonta Davis, and it's the same with Leo Santa Cruz. When these guys are not fighting the best opposition, the ratings really aren't there. And like you said about Davis, I think that has been the problem with all promoters in recent years, is that they have taken this approach where they think if they keep throwing the guy out there against weak opposition, that they're just going to build a name and become a star. And you look at the TV ratings, to fans' credit, that has not been the case. In other words, when you keep throwing a guy out there in these mismatched fights or weak opposition, it's not star building. Now, Leo Santa Cruz has had 2 with Morris, which good matchups, 2 with Frampton. So, and he's proven he's a good fighter. He's probably a little bit underrated in terms of his abilities, but like Jeremiah said, I agree. I mean, I like what PBC's done. I like what they've tried to do, and that's why I support them for those reasons, because I think it's good for boxing, not for any kind of favoritism. But with that said, they're way overdue to have Leo Santa Cruz fight Gary Russell. I mean, that fight just needs to happen. There's just no reason to put that off anymore. They've got both guys. They can put it together tomorrow, and they're the 2 top guys in the division. It's just time to make that fight, period.
All right. It's obvious neither one of you ever pay attention to me. Next up, we got a little boxing news. I did say to be done quick. Teofimo Lopez. Get this one. This one's good. Teofimo Lopez in Mexico to ask WBC for title shot. Unbeaten Teofimo Lopez. This is by the immortal Aragon Garcia again, if you remember him from the other night, Jeremiah. But he traveled to Mexico on Thursday to meet with the WBC president, Mauricio Suleiman, who's just out for the safety and the good well-being of boxers. to ask him to be moved from number 5 to number 1 in the WBC rankings in order to get a title shot at the WBC lightweight title should champion Mikey Garcia vacate. The problem with that is Luke Campbell is the current number 1 mandatory WBC lightweight title. This, I would say, is utter bullshit, Jeremiah. I mean, he's going there to beg to be moved from 5th to 1.
Well, and who would be surprised to see that him being taken up on his word? I mean, Bob Arum's got that money, so he can maneuver a guy. I mean, Luke Campbell himself. I like Luke Campbell. I've always liked him. I mean, he's a nice guy. He's a family man, and he's well spoken. But he himself has been the product of a helping hand in Eddie Hearn and the WBA's relationship, as I noted before, and I'll keep noting. Right, he was moved into the number 1 position for the WBA. By fighting Darlis Perez. And if you look at the rankings, the WBA's archives are available. Go to the month before Darlis Perez magically appeared as the guy to fight Luke Campbell for the number 1 shot. He was ranked in 1 division higher, and I think he was ranked like number 7th. Okay, I mean, nothing should surprise fans anymore, and really we should keep ignoring these stupid trinkets. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Lopez has moved up. And actually, it wouldn't even be a bad fight for him if he got Luke Campbell. But for an alphabet trinket, I'm not into that. I want to see real championships with the number 1 and 2 guys getting it. But in terms of a fight itself, Luke Campbell and Lopez wouldn't be half bad. And it would be, if they really wanted to get Lopez a fight against Lomachenko. I mean, stylistically, there's not a lot of similarities, but he is a southpaw. He does have some nuance. I mean, he's longer than Lomachenko. He's bigger, but there is some similarities, right? There is something to be said of getting experience by fighting guys, in the southpaw stance, because a lot of guys don't do well.
Getwood Aragon, who I think is Mauricio Suleiman's son. He's not really, but he should be. This is what he said about it. He said, the best thing Suleiman could do is to make Lopez and Campbell, is to order them to fight for the interim WBC title.
Yeah, I think that, that's I when I see stuff like these stories, I think that these are, because so many of the fans are just dupes buying into this stuff. I think these are setups to sell certain fights.
Oh, they are. Me and Jeremiah talked about it the other night. I don't even remember what the hell the subject was, but it was the same writer with some bullshit for the WBC. And if you're Aragon Garcia, and you want to come on the show and defend yourself, you're more than welcome to come on any night, Monday through Friday, and you can explain to us why you think a WBC interim title belt fight would be something worthwhile, because it's not. It's stupid. You've got a champion. It's Mikey Garcia.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out, with Hearn's tricky. In other words, he's got the zone in the U.S., but you saw Dillian White pop up in the Chisora rematch on Showtime. So that when he really needs to, he's got some sort of wiggle room where he can pull these guys, apparently. And why I'm saying that is that, I don't think that I know Bob Arum is not going to have Teofimo Lopez go fight on DAZN after building him up on ESPN. So, it looks like a setup for a Lopez-Campbell fight to put an alphabet trinket on the line I don't need that to make it more attractive, but to make it more attractive, instead of having him go fight Lomachenko now. So, can Hearn have Campbell, go on to ESPN? That's what these things end up coming down to. Even though I like this fight, does anybody really believe that, Dillian White in Brazil might happen because the WBC said it was going to happen, and like Al Heyman and Eddie Hearn are just going to go along with what the WBC says? Or do you think it's really because behind the scenes, Eddie Hearn and Al Heyman said, well, we got Wilder Furies happening and Joshua's going to fight Miller, so let's get Brazil and White together, and then it's going to be for the WBC interim heavyweight title.
Wait a second,
instead
guys.
Of just those two guys fighting.
You got to hear the rest of this article. I want Aragon. Aragon, if you're out there, you'll be calling from Mexico, I'm thinking. But listen to this. There are several guys that are in front of Lopez, but it's unclear how serious they are in wanting to fight for the WBC title. Lopez seems to want it more than the rest because he made the trip to the WBC's headquarters so that he could personally ask WBC President Suleiman for the honor to fight for the belt.
Yeah, what an honor. I mean,
yeah, well,
that's exactly.
You know what? I think maybe Joseph Parker should just go fly to one of these sanctioning bodies' houses and see if maybe he can get a title shot against Wilder or Joshua, because that seems fair. If he wants it bad enough to fly somewhere, he should get it over somebody that's earned it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we don't want to involve ourselves with this idea of meritocracy in boxing. I mean, it should be as it is, and it's a lovely state of affairs that we're in, where it's by political association, right? If you're rubbing elbows with Suleiman or Mendoza or any of these other oily turds running these organizations, that's how it should be, right? Hearn should be able to maneuver a guy in a position whether or not he's earned it or not. We're saying with Lopez.
Yeah.
And I think Lopez is a damn talented kid.
I do too.
But there's no interim. There is no interim. Just like the White and Brazil fight, there's no interim. These fights make no sense. They're just milking you of sanctioning fees, and what are they giving you in return, right? They get to send you a kit because you're dying of cancer, but they don't pay your medical bills or something. I mean, come on, it's over and over with this stuff.
Right.
And
how about this? This is the end of the article by Aragon from Boxing News 24, which should be ashamed of itself. Lopez wants to climb from number 5 in the WBC ratings to number 1 with the help of WBC President Suleiman. Lopez wants that precious WBC belt because it's such a historic belt with so much history behind it. A lot of boxing greats have had that title in the past. It would be a real honor for the Brooklyn, New York-born Lopez to have it in his possession as well. Aragon Garcia.
It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I don't know why they think they need these belts. I don't even know why they pay these sanctioning fees, and then the fans that still buy into it. I just don't get it. It just seems like it would be so much easier for everybody to ignore them.
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to ignore them. We're going to wrap the show up unless I find another article by Aragon. If I find a new article by Aragon, we're going to read that bad boy, because I'm pretty sure that he's at least a bastard son of Mauricio Suleiman.
Just click on his name up.
If you're Aragon Garcia, what you could do is you could go to @GruelingTruth on Twitter and tweet to us what day and time you would like to be on the show, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that knows him, and I think it would be entertaining. And you can't click on his name because it's dark, but you can't click on his name. It just...
No. Well, it looks like the Grueling Truth has it over Boxing News 24 then, doesn't it? You can see all of our writers work when you click on their name. Well, maybe they're trying to hide it intentionally. I don't know. They're like, I don't know about this. It adds content, but, not much of substance.
Maybe they just don't read the stuff they put up.
Maybe. I don't know how they curate their news, to be honest with you.
No. But, all right. Anything before we close, Jeremiah?
Yeah, I would say that, I messed up with the Russian guy. I want to own up on that mistake because my mind was clearly not on the task.
African Russian.
Yeah, exactly.
How dare you not know the WBA middleweight rankings?
Hey, at least he didn't pick Shabransky to beat Kovalev. Go ahead, Jeremiah. I told you, I will bring that up more than we used to bring up Pablo Baez. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
I'm okay with it. I saw the Kovalev vulnerability. So.
Yeah. Well, so I would end it with, actually, I've seen the Russian fight. A guy, Robert Hand, who I just want to say I appreciate him because he sends me videos occasionally of these prospects, and a lot of them are Eastern European guys. And he's like, hey, have you heard of this guy? Have you heard of this guy, you should check him out. And I'm not even sure how to say his name, but he was one of them. I don't know if he's related to somebody who used to fight before. I don't know if it's the guy who lost to, who is it, Cornelius Bunridge?
Yeah, you're right. He is. The guy's retired now. That's right. It's
okay.
Brother.
Yeah, I thought I recognized the name. So, yeah, that was a fight at 154 pounds, and Bunridge stopped him, I think, in the 9th round or something. But, yeah, I think he's the younger brother of that guy who lost. And I've watched a little bit of film of this guy, and he's okay. But, with Robert Brandt, I think his volume should get him by. I just want to throw this in there. But it's not as if the Russian doesn't have a little class. I wouldn't be surprised if Brandt had a little trouble. Again, he's not a bum from what I've seen, but he's not a puncher. But, yeah, that's my final word. I just want to own up to my fuck up.
All right. And then, of course, Jeremiah effed up by saying a bad word also. That's just compounding the error, Jeremiah. So we may have to suspend you for tomorrow night. John, are you available tomorrow night at 11?
We'll be watching the fights tomorrow, so that should be around when they're ending. So I could probably presume availability.
Oh, so he's ready to throw you. He's ready to throw you under the bus, Jeremiah. All right, John.
Jeremiah would be out there.
Any final words, John?
The only thing that comes to mind when we're talking about the alphabet stuff is, Krolla being the quote-unquote mandatory for Lomachenko. I think he's 3-2 in his last 5 fights, and if he fights Lomachenko next, it'll be his 3rd alphabet title fight in his last 6. And you've got some people saying he deserves the shot. He deserves the shot.
Oh my God!
He rode his bike to Eddie Hearn's house to ask to stay the #1 contender, so he deserved it because nobody else did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
Good point.
The people that can't see it's ridiculous are frightening. That's why I had to bring that up.
Like Aragon. Maybe you should see if Aragon wants to write for us.
He could talk about how Krolla's earned the shot.
Yeah, because he rode his bike to Eddie Hearn's house. But maybe we need to call Mauricio Suleiman. I've actually got his phone number.
Oh, God.
We could ask him.
Put him on trial.
We could ask him if Lopez was still at his house because we were wanting to interview him together. And we could just call his number and ask him if Aragon's there and see if he gives the guy a phone.
Like Lopez would have to go down to his house instead of Bob Arum just picking up his cell phone and calling him.
Yeah, but this makes it legit because anybody could just pick up the phone and call him. I mean, what the hell? But all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Jeremiah, we back at 11 tomorrow night, or we want to wait till after the fights are over tomorrow night?
Let's see. What time I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it at that time still. Shit, we 11? Might just call the fights as is, right?
Yeah, probably not. But John, if you want to come on, you're more than welcome as always.
Well, let's see what happens tomorrow. Let's see what happens tomorrow night. I should be in a boxing mode.
All right. So, if you're an NFL player, that means you're going to smack your girlfriend. All right, we're going to get off here. I want to remind everybody that you can hear.
You'll be signed by the Browns, though.
Yeah, that's the only drawback. You'll have to live in Cleveland. But what the hell? You live in West Virginia. That's a lot nicer than Cleveland, though, because I've been in both places, and West Virginia is like a place I'd want to vacation over Cleveland. But remember, tomorrow at noon on Survive and Advance, me and Steve Risley will have Brian Ralph from Fan-Sided and Busting Brackets to talk college basketball. And then tomorrow night at 11 o'clock Eastern, you can hear me, Jeremiah, and maybe John if he's in a boxing mood. You can follow us at Grueling Truth. You can hear us all over the place. But the big thing is Jeremiah has pushed. If you could go like, comment, just help us out a little bit here. We are the only, as far as I know, as of right now, the only daily boxing show. So we could use all the support we could get here. It's not easy for Jeremiah to put up with me every night. So if you could give us a like and a comment, that would help out. But that's it for tonight. We will see you tomorrow night on thegruelingtruth.net. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, YouTube, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser. Almost forgot your name, Jeremiah. I am Mike Goodpaster, and you've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.